Elon Musk met with House Republicans Wednesday evening to fill them in on the latest Department of Government Efficiency's findings. And it feels like we're always finding some really interesting things, but this was official. How to permanently stop waste, fraud, and abuse from occurring, and he met with them to also strategize with the GOP on how to codify the saved funds DOGE has recovered so far. They're even considering writing all of us DOGE return checks. Wouldn't that be nice? This comes as the House GOP and its leadership are working around the clock to avoid a government shutdown. March 14 is the looming deadline. Just as they wouldn't stand for America during the president's joint session, Democrats, of course, continue to be in a very sour mood, even on issues like waste, fraud, and abuse. And they do not want to get on board with a stopgap bill that would keep the government funded through September. So they're resisting all around. Joining us now is Congressman Michael Cloud of Texas's 27th District. He's a member of the DOGE committee. What a committee to be on. Welcome, Congressman.
Well, thank you. It's good to be on with you. And yeah, a lot of work's being done in the DOGE arena. Certainly, we're just getting started on the committee. Of course, we've got some great work already done, but excited about what's happening and really the steps ahead that we're looking forward to.
Well, Elon Musk had lunch with GOP senators earlier Wednesday, and, other lawmakers. Take us behind the scenes of this meeting, what you've heard from colleagues and what you have seen yourself. Meeting with Musk, how will Musk and the administration ensure that Congress gets a say in these cuts going forward?
Well, that's one of the big things we as a committee and as a conference wanted to do, was to meet with him to make sure that we're building the communication conduits to make sure that the information that they're uncovering, we're taking that and that we're implementing it, that we're working it through committee to bring light and transparency to it, but then that we're working to codify it through the legislative process and the funding bills that'll be coming up this year. It's important for us to do this, of course, because we certainly are excited about what President Trump and his administration are doing. Just even as a voter and as an American, I'm super pumped to see finally we have a president in office who's doing what he said he would do, and with gusto, if we can say so. And but it's important for us to codify it to make sure that this is not just a wonderful few years in the course of American history, but that this is truly a course correction and a pivot point that we make for our kids and for our grandkids down the line.
What specific legislation do you think will actually come out of the DOGE caucus?
Well, we can get specific amendments to certain bills. We're looking at different things for transparency. One of the bills that we're working on, one of the big issues as we've gotten into the grant and the contracting, you hear about all the grants that are going out through USAID, the transgender operas in other countries and all the crazy stuff that you've seen, but you try to bring accountability to it. And there's no employee ID attached to it, for example. And so when it comes to bringing bringing accountability to an individual or employee who's misusing taxpayer funds, those kind of things. So there's a lot of process things that are going on. One of the things that's really happening, you'll see Elon and he wears the tech support shirt, but it's really a big part of what's happening here. So you're dealing with systems throughout the federal government that don't talk to each other, and they're antiquated. And so, for example, we can now take the Social Security database and compare it to the Small Business Association database, and then we find out that there's several thousand people getting small business loans who are over 115 years old. And so hundreds of millions of dollars savings to be found just by getting these databases to talk to each other. Now, one of the big issues that DOGE is facing right now is that as they're trying to go department by department by department, the establishment bureaucracy that, of course, hates change and thinks that they're more important and established than the duly elected president of the United States.
It's remarkable to watch with the speed and the flexibility that they've been able to bring to government. I'm sure it's a shock to the bureaucracy, but that's exactly what we voted for. Let me ask you this. I know there's a ton on DOGE's plate, and there's a ton on your plate.
Exactly.
And you guys are doing a lot going into the next few weeks. But I've got a lot of questions about the money that we send to Ukraine. And DOGE has recently expressed some interest in looking into some of the grants and the funds that we send over to Ukraine in this war effort. Tell me, from a congressional side, how much energy is in Congress, amongst your colleagues, with yourself, to look into and follow any money going to Ukraine that are likely being abused?
Yeah. You know, there's been a great debate across Congress over the last several years about whether or not Ukraine should be funded or not, but there should be unanimity for the fact that we need to audit what's happened. Even Zelensky says he doesn't know where half the money is, and we've heard reports of some of the weapon systems even that we have sent have turned up on the black market, going to entities that are fighting United States interests. This is very, very concerning. And so we definitely need to audit what's going on. I'm happy to see President Trump's strong stance on where we're at. And it was troubling to me to see during the joint session of Congress, as President Trump talked about funding Ukraine, that was the only thing that got applause from the Dems on it, was to continue funding them. But even when he talked about bringing peace to Ukraine, they were not interested in that at all. And so I'm not sure what ends they're trying to fund toward, but these are the kind of things that we have to bring accountability to, because there are certainly special interests who are profiting off of this war. And so we've got to make sure that we do everything we can to bring peace through the strength that we see that President Trump is bringing to this conversation.
Well, what do you think is the impact on DOGE on Texas? I know that DOGE is a more national conversation, but Texas is a huge part of our spending, our economy, our overall national health. What does Texas stand to lose or gain from these cuts?
Yeah, this is one of those things where it's like any family who sits down and looks at their budget and says, okay, we got to bring our spending in check. You know, it's going to be painful maybe for a little bit, but in the long term, we know that we are doing everything that we need to preserve this great country for our kids and our grandkids. And especially if you look at where the U.S. dollar is right now and the Treasury bonds and where the markets are for those kind of things, we have to signal to investors that we are going to change the fiscal course of this nation. Otherwise, we could, God forbid, see the collapse of the U.S. dollar, which makes any sort of conversation that we're having here in Congress about what priorities we should have irrelevant. So we're looking through where those personnel savings need to be and which positions are essential. But the Trump administration was like this in the first administration. We're seeing it with the DOGE team now in the second administration, where we get the big picture and we're marching toward it. And as we need to make course corrections, we'll make those changes.
Well, and last question. So the Supreme Court has thrown a little bit of a wrench in some of this. They ruled against unilateral cuts. How does that work with DOGE? How will the administration work with Congress to carry out DOGE if the Supreme Court has stepped in and said you can't go in there and unilaterally cut items from the federal government?
My understanding of the decision, and I have not read through it all because we've been busy on what is in our jurisdiction in Congress, is that it was narrowly focused to contracts that had already been performed, for example. So it was money that, and it was just a temporary stay, that this case will be brought up again here in a few months, and that the Supreme Court will really give it the full-throated evaluation and decision on it. You know, I think the Constitution's pretty clear, and certainly throughout our history and practice, that the executive has the executive authority to manage the budget and the funds that Congress sends them. It's ludicrous to think that if you can find savings that you can't implement savings for the American people. If you're able to do something cheaper, better, more efficiently, of course the executive should have the power to do that. And so that's been the practice for the vast majority of our history. Certainly George Washington, who was there when the Constitution was signed, had that authority. And so I think we can look toward our history and understand that this should be the clear prerogative of the executive.
I said one last question, but here's my actually last question, Congressman. I want to highlight this bill that you actually co-sponsored, and it has to do with pulling back Joe Biden's or the Biden administration's funding through FEMA for illegal immigrants to benefit from shelter and services and grants through non-federal entities. So illegal immigrants were getting housing, transportation, and all kinds of other services to the tune of $1.4 billion in grants awarded by the Biden administration. You're looking to pull that back. Where is that bill right now?
Yes, we just authored it and have released it, and people are signing on, and co-sponsors are behind this effort. And again, this is one of those things where President Trump has done a good job. He's refocused that money on where it needs to go, but we have to, again, make sure that we're passing the legislation to make sure that we continue this course correction. And so this bill is one of those bills. You know, in our oversight hearing yesterday, we had 4 mayors there, and I asked each one of them how much FEMA dollars had been spent on hotel rooms in their communities. And between the 4 cities, it was roughly $200 million just in those 4 cities, just on housing illegal aliens in their cities. And of course, we all know FEMA, that those funds are expected by the American taxpayer to help out in the results of in recovering from a natural disaster for the American people who've paid into it. And so they rightfully so are angered when they see that people who have not helped build this country. Of course, immigrants have helped build our country, but these migrants who've just appeared and come across illegally across our borders have not helped build this country. And yet we're housing them in hotel rooms. We're providing all these free services. And really, that's not what this nation's about. You know, my wife's an immigrant. We can think about the Statue of Liberty and the history of immigrants who, we all know the story of a number of immigrants who've come with, you know, just a small handful of cash in their pocket, and they worked hard and built this country. That's really what the story's supposed to be about, and that's not what we saw under the Biden administration at all.
No doubt. Congressman Cloud from the great 27th District of Texas, thank you so much for the time, and keep slashing and burning. We love to see it. China's awfully quiet these days, but they're not up to nothing. Gordon Chang has some details. We'll be right back.